Hostess's final shift, submitted by Napat Phanumat. My name is Gift, and for the past year, I've worked at a well-known gentlemen's club in Bangkok. It's a place where businessmen and high-profile clients come for drinks and entertainment. A job that pays well but comes with late nights, and the kind of work that makes you invisible, unless someone needs something from you. The girls here are always changing, some leaving after a few months, others staying for years. Ploy, though, was different. She had only been at the club for a short time, but she stood out. There was something about her. The way she smiled, the way she always talked about saving money for her family back in Iceland. We got along well, but then one night, she didn't show up for her shift. It wasn't uncommon for girls to leave without saying goodbye, but Ploy had always been reliable. The night she disappeared was busy as usual, but there was something strange in the air, something heavy that I couldn't explain. I told myself she had probably found a better job or decided to quit, but deep down, something felt off. Weeks passed and no one heard from her. The girls gossiped a little, but most just shrugged it off. It wasn't until one Friday night that things started to feel really wrong. The club was packed that night as usual, VIPs in their private booths, music pulsing through the air, and customers ordering rounds of drinks. I was serving one of the tables near the back when I saw her. Ploy. She was standing near the entrance, just watching. She was dressed in the same black dress we all wore for work, and at first I thought maybe she had come back. But there was something about her. Her skin looked too pale, almost like she was glowing under the dim lights. I blinked, thinking I must be imagining it. But when I looked again, she was still there, staring at me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I froze, unsure of what to do. I wanted to walk over to her, ask her where she had been, but something held me back. Before I could move, she disappeared into the shadows, like she had never been there at all. For the rest of the night, I couldn't get Ploy's face out of my mind. My hands shook as I served drinks, my eyes constantly darting toward the entrance, waiting to see her again. But she didn't come back. Still, the feeling of being watched stayed with me. Every time I passed by the corner booths or looked into the dimly lit mirrors, I felt her presence. A few nights later, it happened again. The club was quieter this time, a slow night with only a handful of customers. I was cleaning up after closing when I saw her again. Ploy. She was sitting at one of the empty VIP booths, her head tilted slightly to the side, her eyes fixed on me. My heart leapt into my throat. Her face looked different this time, paler, more distant, like she wasn't really there. I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. I wanted to call out to one of the other girls, but my voice wouldn't come. I took a slow step forward, my breath shallow as I approached the booth. But just as I reached out, the lights flickered, and when I looked again, she was gone. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in my apartment felt like it was connected to her. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside my window. I knew I wasn't imagining it. She was trying to tell me something, but I didn't know what. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The weight of her presence clung to me like a shadow. I decided to visit a temple, something I hadn't done in a long time. I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe the monks could help. Maybe they could bless me and offer some kind of protection. At the temple, the monk tied a small white string around my wrist and muttered a prayer for my safety. "Be careful," he said softly as he handed me the incense to light. "Some spirits can't find peace." As I walked away from the temple, the white string tied around my wrist, I felt a little lighter, like the weight on my shoulders had lifted slightly. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Ploy wasn't gone, not really. I could still feel her presence, lingering in the corners of the club, watching from the shadows. The next week, I was back at work trying to push the thoughts of her out of my mind, but the unease never left. Every time I walked by the corner booths, I half expected to see her sitting there, waiting for me with that same distant expression. And sometimes when the music was loud and the lights were low, I thought I could hear her voice, a faint whisper, barely audible over the thrum of the bass. One night, I was heading home after a long shift. The streets of Bangkok were quiet, unusually so for that time of night. The usual vendors and tuk-tuk drivers had disappeared, and the city felt almost deserted. I passed by the small shrine near the entrance to my apartment building, the faint glow of incense sticks still burning from earlier in the day. I stopped for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I light another stick? Would it even help? As I stood there, debating, I felt it again, that cold breeze, like someone was standing just behind me. I turned quickly, but the street was empty. My heart raced as I hurried inside, the weight of Ploy's presence heavy on my mind. A few nights later, it happened again. I was cleaning up after another slow night at the club when I saw her, sitting in the same booth, her figure barely visible in the dim light. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. The sadness in her gaze, the emptiness. She wasn't just haunting me. She was trapped, unable to move on. I took a step toward her, my hand shaking. "Ploy," I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't respond. She just sat there, staring at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't understand. And then, just like before, she was gone, disappearing into the shadows as if she had never been there at all. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air, a reminder of her presence. I don't work at the club anymore. I couldn't stay, not after everything that happened. I moved to a different part of the city, trying to leave it all behind. But sometimes late at night, I still feel it, that cold breeze, the faint scent of jasmine, and the weight of her presence, reminding me that no matter how far I go, I can never truly escape the past. The day after I left the club for good, I went back to the temple. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, maybe some kind of peace, maybe a way to finally put everything behind me. The monks were busy preparing for a ceremony, their chants echoing softly through the temple grounds. I found a quiet spot to sit and reflect, the white string still tied around my wrist, fraying at the edges. I closed my eyes and let the sounds of the temple wash over me. The low hum of the chants, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft chime of bells swaying in the wind. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, like maybe this was the start of something better. But as I opened my eyes, I saw her again, Ploy, standing at the edge of the temple grounds, watching me. Her figure was faint, barely more than a shadow, but I knew it was her. She wasn't in the club anymore. She had followed me here. I stood up quickly, my heart racing, as her figure faded into the trees. I stumbled toward the monks, desperate for answers, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I explain that the girl who disappeared was still haunting me, even now, in this sacred place? One of the older monks approached me, his eyes filled with understanding. "You cannot run from her," he said softly. "Some spirits are bound by unfinished business. She will not leave until she is at peace." I nodded, my chest tight with fear. But how do I help her? How do I make it stop? The monk handed me a small bundle of incense. Sometimes, all we can do is offer them our prayers and hope they find their way. But remember, the dead are not like us. They cling to the world they knew. You must be strong. That night, I lit the incense in my apartment, praying silently for Ploy to find peace. But even as the smoke curled around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't gone. The air in the room felt heavy, and the scent of jasmine filled the air again, stronger this time, as if she were standing right beside me. I don't know if Ploy will ever find peace. Maybe she's still out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. Or maybe she's finally moved on. But I know one thing for sure. No matter what happens, I will never forget her or the weight of her presence, following me through the shadows of Bangkok.